This is video number 2 of the Essential Firearm Safe Checklist, and this is element 1, direction of least consequence. Before we jump into the first step of our firearm safe handling checklist, let's talk about how to safely access a handgun and how to safely pick it up. If I'm holding a gun, well, that's a pointed gun, so I need to be careful of what it's pointed at. To get my handgun out of this handgun case, I'll lay the case flat on a table and I'll open the case to see how the handgun is positioned in the case. This allows me to orient the case correctly before I fully open it. I can also put a sticker on the outside of my gun case so I'll know how the gun is positioned inside the case and I won't have to open it up to check. So now when I open this, I already know that this is the direction that the barrel's pointed and I want this toward my direction of least consequence. And there we go. So that's one method that you can use also. You can use a Sharpie or a sticker or just about anything. I'm careful to never allow skin to touch the gun until I'm sure that that gun is pointed in the direction of least consequence. There's a concrete wall behind us here, and so that's my direction of least consequence. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the gun over so the grip is oriented toward my primary hand. That'll make it much easier to pick up. So notice I've not yet touched the gun. I opened the gun case and now I'm going to roll the gun over. I roll the gun over like this so the grip is oriented toward my primary hand, making it easier to pick up. It's tough to pick up a gun if my fingers are going under the grip of the gun. And lastly, I pick up the gun like I'm going to shoot it. I don't want to pick it up like this because it's too easy to let a finger slip into the trigger guard and depress the trigger. So I lift the back of it up just a little bit. And that's not okay. That's not okay. I want my index finger right up here, nice and high on the slide or on the frame of the gun. And then once I have a grip like this, now it's okay if I actually pick up the gun. So before I put any skin on the gun, it's pointed in the direction of least consequence. And when I pick up the gun, it stays pointed in the direction of least consequence. Now that we know how to hold a handgun, we're ready to jump into the first item on our safe handling checklist. You may have already figured it out. It's always keep firearms pointed in the direction of least consequence. It's important to realize that if I'm holding a gun, it's a pointed gun, and I must be continually mindful of what it's pointed at. The idea here is, should I inadvertently depress the trigger, causing an unplanned or unexpected discharge, guns can't go off by themselves. In what direction would that bullet cause the least amount of damage? Whatever projectile passes through, whatever that bullet passes through will have a hole in it, and whatever's in that hole will be gone forever. So I must always keep the gun pointed at something that will stop a bullet. In the home, an exterior wall could be a low or a high consequence direction, depending on the materials from which my home is constructed. A concrete wall, a traditional mattress, a dresser full of clothes, a bookcase full of books, those all often work well as directions of least consequence. In the home, the direction of least consequence certainly is never at pets or high-dollar items. It should go without saying, a gun is never to be pointed at a human that doesn't need a gun pointed at them. Nor should a gun be pointed at any part of a human or at any part of myself. That's certainly not a direction of least consequence. Cased guns or holstered guns, like these, where the gun is completely encased or the holster completely covers the trigger guard with a rigid material that keeps fingers and items out of the trigger guard and away from the trigger, cased guns and holstered guns are not pointed at anything. At the shooting range, the direction of least consequence is almost always the bullet trap, berm, or toward the ground at a low ready. Up is generally disfavored as a safe direction because what goes up must come down. Even if I have checked and I know that the gun I'm holding is unloaded, it's still imperative that I keep the gun pointed in the direction of least consequence. So to recap, before I allow my skin to touch the gun, I'm going to verbally identify my direction of least consequence. And the first element of our safe handling checklist is to always keep firearms pointed in the direction of least consequence, keeping in mind within that direction there must be an object that's solid enough to stop a bullet. Let's go on to our next step.